Hello, this is Claire Howell from the Skagit Fisheries Enhancement Group. Today I'm coming to you virtually with Lucy DeGrace to teach Unit 5 in the Junior Stream Stewards program. This is what the first page of your worksheet looks like. It has a couple questions about what macroinvertebrates are and what the information they can tell us about the creek, as well as specifically what they look like. So, as we get started, think about what a macroinvertebrate might be. What is a macroinvertebrate? A macroinvertebrate is any sort of invertebrate, so a creature without a spine, that is large enough to be seen without a microscope. So this could include a crustacean like a crawdad, mollusks like snails or mussels, or insects like this caddisfly larva pictured here. Let's go to Lucy to learn more about macroinvertebrates.
I'm standing in Friday Creek, which is a fantastic place to find these macroinvertebrates. And you can sort of see some of the habitat that they're found in, very similar to what you'd find salmon in. Rocky bottom stream, nice and clear with lots of oxygen. And as you can see, lots of vegetation of different types. The deciduous trees that are around us provide, when they drop their leaves in the fall, they provide food source for these macroinvertebrates, and the evergreens around us provide year-round shade so that the water doesn't get too warm.
How do macroinvertebrates relate to salmon? There are two main ways that macroinvertebrates relate to salmon. They can provide food, and they can indicate or show how clean the water is. Lucy will tell us more.
Now that we know what macroinvertebrates are, why are they important, or why are we concerned with finding them in a stream? There's two reasons. One of the reasons is that these are a food source for salmon, juvenile salmon, before they migrate out of freshwater and into saltwater. So if we find them in a stream, then we know there's a food source for the salmon. If we don't find any, then we probably won't find any salmon in the stream. The other reason we're concerned with macroinvertebrates and want to see what's in the stream is some of them are very sensitive to poor water quality, just like salmon. Some of them are very sensitive to water temperature, turbidity, which is the cloudiness or clearness of the water, and the oxygen level in the water. So if the habitat is good for the macroinvertebrates, then it's good for the salmon. So those are the reasons that we study macroinvertebrates. It's biological water quality monitoring.
Here is the first page of your worksheet. At this point, you should be able to answer question 1, what is a macroinvertebrate? And question 3, what do we mean by indicator species? So if you haven't already, go ahead and fill out the answer to those two questions. Next, we will see what macroinvertebrates Lucy can find in Friday Creek.
The way we find macroinvertebrates, some of them are really easy because, like these caddisflies, they're right on top of the rocks and you can just reach in and pick them up. Some other caddisfly varieties here that made their shells out of materials such as fir needles. For the macros that are, For the macros that are not just right on top of the rocks, we have to reach in, find a rock that we can pick up, turn it over. One way to separate out and classify or identify your macroinvertebrates is to use an ice cube tray. And I have put each one into a separate section of the ice cube tray so that I can separate them out and really get a better look at just an individual macroinvertebrate.
is a mayfly nymph. A mayfly is a type of insect. Nymph refers to the aquatic juvenile phase in its life cycle, when it lives and eats in the creek. Other insects with a nymph phase include stoneflies, damselflies, and dragonflies. At the end of its life, the mayfly will go through metamorphosis, meaning that its body will change. In this case, it will grow wings and it will leave the creek. Other aquatic insects, such as the dragonfly and damselfly, go through a very similar metamorphosis. This is a caddisfly larva. You can see that it has built a protective shell for itself out of dirt and sand and other debris in the creek. Caddisflies also go through metamorphosis, but it's a different process than in the stonefly and mayfly, so instead of being called a nymph, they are called a larva at this stage in their life. Caddisflies are very sensitive to levels of dissolved oxygen. This is a freshwater mussel shell, a different type of macroinvertebrate. Instead of being an insect, this is a mollusk, so it's related to snails and slugs. It will spend its entire life in freshwater, and it won't go through that period of metamorphosis like you see with some of the aquatic insects. On the second page of your worksheet, you can see some of the different macroinvertebrates that we might find in the creek, as well as what they mean for water quality. So, caddisfly larvae, or stonefly or mayfly larvae, mean that the water quality is good, whereas other macroinvertebrates, like a crawdad, can live in poorer water quality. Using the macroinvertebrates that Lucy found, as well as the second page of your worksheet, go ahead and address questions 2 and 4. Name 4 examples of macroinvertebrates that you might find in a stream, and then in question 4, use those visuals to go ahead and sketch some of the macroinvertebrates that you might see. The abundance and type of macroinvertebrates in a creek can tell us how likely it is that we'll find salmon in that creek. So, looking at the macroinvertebrates on this rock, do you think it's likely that we'll find salmon in Friday Creek? Let's check in with Lucy and see what she found.
There is a juvenile salmon in there. He's surrounded by caddisflies on the rocks. That could be a chinook, or it could be a coho. Hard to tell unless I catch them. But I'm not going to try to catch them because they are really hard to catch and I don't want to harass the salmon. So I'm going to leave them there. But you can see the habitat. Lots of different size of rock. That way, when this guy or gal comes back in a couple of years to spawn, it will have some spawning gravel. And we know that this creek, Friday Creek, is great for macroinvertebrates because we find all kinds of them. So we know that it has food for now, and its babies in a few years are going to have food as well. Look how clear the water is.
Great. So there are salmon living in Friday Creek. We can tell that it's a healthy environment because of the clear water, as well as the macroinvertebrates that are only able to live there because the water is clean and clear and cold and has plenty of oxygen, which are exactly the same things that the salmon needs to be successful. There's also lots of food for the salmon. At this point, you should have all of the information that you need to complete the worksheet. So, I'll say goodbye and thank you very much for joining us in learning about macroinvertebrates.